The screams of dying women echoed through the colony streets, and the air reeked of ozone and burnt flesh as the Empire's soldiers advanced with cold efficiency. Logan Graves had seen 1,000 battlefields. He had marched through the ruins of fallen civilizations, watched cities crumble under orbital bombardments, and killed more beings than he cared to count. But this was different. The Empire wasn't fighting soldiers. It was exterminating them. The town of Eldoria, once a thriving human settlement on the fringes of known space, had been reduced to a smoldering ruin in a matter of hours. Streets once filled with laughter and life were now a wasteland of charred bodies and collapsed buildings. Women clutched their children as they were dragged into the streets, their cries for mercy drowned beneath the droning commands of the Empire's officers. Logan stood in chains, forced to watch as soldiers in black armor executed the last remnants of resistance. "Commander Karvok, the human prisoners have been secured," an Empire lieutenant reported, his segmented mandibles clicking together. Karvok stood tall, his carapace gleaming under the colony's burning skyline. His species, the Zerani, had long served as the Empire's enforcers, their merciless efficiency making them perfect instruments of war. His cold, multifaceted eyes settled on Logan with something that resembled curiosity, then indifference. Logan clenched his fists as a young woman, no older than 20, was shoved to her knees before the commander. She trembled, her clothes torn, her body bruised from whatever horror she had already endured. Karvok studied her, as if she were an insect, before giving a simple nod. A soldier raised his plasma rifle. "Wait!" Logan barked, stepping forward before the guards yanked his chains back. "This is madness. You've already won. Killing them does nothing but—" A single shot rang out. The woman crumpled to the ground, a smoking hole in her skull. Logan's body went rigid. He had seen death. He had caused it. But this was slaughter. Karvok turned toward him, his mandibles spreading in something akin to amusement. "You humans have always misunderstood the nature of war." He gestured to the corpses littering the ground. "Victory is not won by simply defeating an enemy. It is won by ensuring they never rise again." Logan met his gaze, his voice low and measured. "Kill our men, and we mourn. Kill our women, and we become monsters." The alien commander chittered in laughter. "You still believe your species is special." He gestured to the soldiers. "Take him to the holding cells. When this is over, we will see if he still clings to his delusions." They dragged Logan away, his muscles aching as the chains dug into his wrists. He didn't struggle. Not yet. But as he was led through the ruins of Eldoria, past the broken bodies and smoldering wreckage, something inside him shifted. The Empire thought humanity was broken. They had no idea what they had just awakened. Hours passed. Maybe days. The cold walls of Logan's cell did little to quiet the storm raging inside his head. He sat in darkness, listening to the muffled cries of the few remaining prisoners. Each voice that fell silent sent another crack through the dam, holding back his fury. Then the door slid open. A human figure stepped inside, her silhouette barely visible against the dim light spilling from the corridor. "Logan," she whispered. His eyes narrowed. He recognized that voice. Ava Sinclair. She had been a medical officer before the war, a woman who had once sworn an oath to save lives. Now, she was a soldier, her face hardened by grief and vengeance. A deep scar ran from her temple to her jawline, a souvenir from an Empire blade. "How the hell did you?" Logan started. "No time." She knelt, pulling a blade from her boot and slicing through his restraints. "We're getting out of here." Logan rubbed his wrists as the cuffs fell away, flexing his fingers. "Where's the rest of your team?" Ava's jaw tightened. "Dead. They caught us setting charges near the barracks." Logan exhaled sharply. "Damn." She handed him a plasma pistol, her voice steel. "We finished what we started." Logan checked the charge, then gave her a sharp nod. They slipped into the corridor, moving like shadows through the enemy stronghold. The scent of burning metal and scorched flesh filled the air. The massacre was still ongoing. Ava led him through the winding halls, past slumped guards with slit throats. The human resistance had been busy. They reached the command center. Logan peered through the viewport, his hands clenching into fists. Karvok stood at the helm, overlooking the destruction with a sickening sense of satisfaction. Ava whispered, "We could kill him right now." Logan shook his head. "Not yet." Ava frowned. "Why the hell not?" "Because we need him to understand." Logan's voice was quiet but lethal. "We need him to know what's coming." Ava studied him for a moment, then nodded. The two of them moved like wraiths through the facility, planting charges, taking down isolated patrols. The Empire had grown complacent. They thought the fight was over. They were wrong. By the time the first explosion rocked the compound, Logan and Ava were already gone, vanishing into the night as the embers of Eldoria burned behind them. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The first Imperial patrol never saw it coming. One moment, they were trudging through the ruins of Eldoria, their black armor gleaming beneath the colony's artificial moonlight. The next, the night exploded in fire and shrapnel. The ground heaved as charges hidden beneath the rubble tore through the squad, sending twisted metal and severed limbs into the air. The surviving soldiers barely had time to scream before the resistance fell upon them. Logan Graves moved with lethal efficiency, emerging from the smoke with plasma rifle in hand. He squeezed the trigger once, twice, each shot finding its mark. Ava was beside him, her knife flashing in the dim light as she drove it between the plates of an enemy's armor. The last Zorani soldier, wounded and panicked, reached for his communicator. Logan stepped forward and crushed the device beneath his boot before firing a shot through the alien skull. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the crackling flames. Ava wiped her blade against her sleeve, her breath steady despite the carnage. "That's the third patrol this week. They'll stop sending small squads," Logan muttered, surveying the remains. "Next time, they'll bring an entire war band." Ava's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Let them." Logan didn't respond, but he understood the sentiment. The Empire had made a critical mistake. They had assumed humanity would break. Instead, they had forged something far more dangerous. Word of the massacre had reached Earth. Every broadcast, every transmission was filled with the same grim footage. Women and children gunned down in the streets, their lifeless bodies left to rot beneath the Empire's banners. The response had been immediate and absolute. The war was no longer about resistance. It was about vengeance. Earth's remaining fleet, once scattered and in retreat, had returned with a fury that defied logic. Civilian engineers had become weapons manufacturers. Scientists had abandoned research projects to design new ways to kill. The Empire had wanted to erase humanity's future. Instead, they had given birth to an enemy unlike anything they had ever faced. Logan and Ava made their way through the crumbling city, slipping between shattered buildings and tunnels that had become the Resistance's lifeline. Their base, what remained of it, was nestled beneath the ruins of an old government center. Armed fighters moved through the dimly lit corridors, their faces hard, their eyes burning with purpose. Many of them were women. Some had been teachers, doctors, mothers. Now they were soldiers. Ava stopped near a makeshift command station, where a group of leaders studied a holomap. "We took out the patrol, but it won't be long before they notice." A woman with close-cropped hair and a jagged scar across her throat nodded. "Then we hit them first." Logan crossed his arms. "What are we looking at?" The leader, Serena Holt, one of the first to rise after the massacre, gestured to a glowing red marker on the map. "The Empire is stockpiling resources at an outpost 3 clicks south. Weapons, vehicles, rations. They think it's secure." Ava smirked. "They think wrong." Logan studied the map, his mind already working through the possibilities. "What's the security detail?" "Light," Serena said. "They don't see us as a real threat yet." That was about to change. The attack came at dawn. The outpost stood on the edge of the ruins, a hastily fortified structure surrounded by automated turrets and perimeter guards. Empire banners hung from the walls, a stark reminder of their arrogance. Logan led the charge, moving like a shadow through the rubble. He had fought for the Empire once, years ago, before he had seen them for what they truly were. He knew how they thought, how they moved, how they underestimated their enemies. The first explosion tore through the south wall, sending debris flying. The guards barely had time to react before the resistance poured through the breach, weapons blazing. Logan fired in quick, controlled bursts, his shots precise. Ava moved beside him, a blur of motion as she cut down enemies with brutal efficiency. The Empire soldiers, caught off guard, scrambled to mount a defense. A Zerani officer bellowed orders, his mandibles clicking in agitation. He barely had time to turn before Logan drove a knife into his throat. The battle was over in minutes. The Empire's forces, so confident in their superiority, had crumbled under the weight of human rage. Serena stood over the fallen bodies, her gaze cold. No survivors. Logan didn't argue. Mercy had died on Eldoria. As they looted the outpost, gathering weapons and supplies, a transmission crackled to life on a nearby console. A voice, harsh, commanding, spoke in the Empire's guttural language. "This is Commander Karvok. Report." Logan stepped forward, pressing a blood-stained hand to the control panel. He spoke in perfect Zerani, his voice a quiet promise of destruction. "They're all dead." There was a long silence. Then Karvok's voice returned, laced with something that might have been unease. "Graves." Logan's grip tightened around his rifle. "I warned you." Another pause. Then, "You think this is victory? You think this changes anything?" Logan's lips curled into something between a smile and a snarl. "No," he said, "but it's a start." He cut the transmission. Behind him, the resistance was already moving, preparing for the next battle. The war wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making the Empire bleed. The Imperial warship descended through the burning sky, its black hull reflecting the chaos below. Logan Graves watched from the ruins of a shattered skyscraper, his rifle steady against his shoulder. Ava crouched beside him, her eyes locked on the enemy forces flooding into the streets. The Empire had finally answered their defiance. "They're not playing around anymore," Ava muttered, her voice laced with something between anticipation and fury. Logan scanned the battlefield, his jaw tight. The Empire had deployed shock troopers, elites clad in reinforced armor, their plasma rifles humming with deadly precision. They moved with cold efficiency, sweeping through the ruins, hunting for survivors. "Good." He exhaled, slow and steady. "They think this is the end of the fight." Ava smirked. "They're about to learn otherwise." The resistance was scattered, but far from broken. Over the past weeks, their forces had grown. More humans had arrived, soldiers, smugglers, even former Imperial defectors, all drawn by the same unrelenting need for vengeance. And now, the moment had come to make the Empire bleed. Logan activated his comms. "All teams, hold position. Wait for my signal." Below, the Imperial forces spread out, unaware that they had just walked into the jaws of a trap. Logan's voice was calm, unwavering. "Now!" The ruins erupted. Explosions tore through the streets as hidden charges ignited beneath the enemy's feet. Entire squads vanished in the firestorm, their screams swallowed by the roar of destruction. Resistance fighters emerged from the wreckage, weapons blazing. Logan and Ava opened fire, cutting down Imperials with ruthless precision. Ava's blade flashed as she leapt from cover, driving her knife between the gaps in an enemy soldier's armor. Logan dropped 3 more with clean, precise shots, moving with the efficiency of a man who had lived and breathed war for far too long. The Empire had come expecting a slaughter. Instead, they had found hell. But the Imperials adapted quickly. Shock troopers regrouped, their formations tightening. Plasma turrets deployed from the warship, raining fire down upon the rebels. A blast detonated just feet from Logan, throwing him against the crumbling wall of a collapsed building. His vision swam. His ears rang. Ava yanked him to his feet. "We need to move." Logan shook off the dizziness, his grip tightening around his rifle. "Not yet." The warship's main ramp lowered, and a figure emerged. Commander Karvok. The Zerani commander stood at the heart of the battlefield, his massive form clad in ornate black armor. His mandibles clicked in quiet amusement as he surveyed the carnage. "So this is humanity's answer," Karvok mused, his voice carrying across the ruins. Desperation dressed as defiance. Logan stepped forward, weapon raised. "No, this is the beginning of your end." Karvok tilted his head. "You still do not understand, do you, Graves? You are insects fighting against the inevitable. The Empire does not fall." Logan's finger hovered over the trigger. "Neither do we." The battlefield froze. For a moment, there was only silence. Two warriors standing amidst the bodies of the fallen, their pasts colliding in the wreckage of a dying city. Then Karvok moved. Fast. The Zerani commander lunged, his energy blade igniting in a brilliant arc of violet light. Logan barely twisted in time, the blade slicing past his ribs. Pain flared through his side, but he didn't stop. He drove his rifle up, slamming it against Karvok's head before rolling away. Ava struck next, her knife flashing toward the alien's throat. Karvok caught her wrist mid-strike, twisting with bone-snapping force. Ava gritted her teeth against the pain, driving her knee into the commander's side before wrenching free. Logan was already moving, dodging another lethal swipe. He fired point-blank, the plasma bolts searing against Karvok's armor. The commander barely flinched. "You fight well," Karvok admitted, his mandibles spreading in something akin to respect. "But this ends now." Logan saw the movement too late. Karvok's fist slammed into his chest, sending him crashing through the rubble. His lungs burned. His vision blurred. He could hear Ava still fighting, still refusing to fall. But she wouldn't last. Not alone. Logan forced himself to stand, his muscles screaming in protest. His fingers found the detonator strapped to his belt. Karvok loomed over Ava, his blade raised for the final strike. Logan didn't hesitate. He pressed the trigger. The ground beneath Karvok erupted. The charges they had planted days ago, deep within the ruins, detonated in a violent inferno. The entire street collapsed, swallowing Karvok and his soldiers in a torrent of fire and dust. Logan pulled Ava back as debris rained around them, shielding her with his body. The blast roared through the ruins, shaking the very bones of the city. And then silence. The warship above faltered. Alarms blared. The Imperials, disoriented, fell into disarray. Logan pushed himself up, breathing hard. Ava coughed, her face streaked with blood and soot. "Did we?" she rasped. Logan stared at the smoldering crater where Karvok had stood. The ground was shattered, molten metal pooling in the wreckage. He exhaled slowly. Not yet. The battle wasn't over. The Empire wouldn't retreat so easily. But the tide had turned. And soon, the real reckoning would begin. The sky was burning. Columns of black smoke twisted into the heavens, their shadows stretching over the ruins of Eldoria like the fingers of a dying god. The Imperial warship, crippled from the blast, hung in the sky, its engines sputtering. Small fires flickered along its hull, and from its open bay doors, Logan could see the chaos unfolding within. Officers scrambling, alarms shrieking, the once imposing war machine crumbling before his eyes. But Karvok wasn't dead. Logan felt it in his bones before he saw the movement in the wreckage. The ruins trembled, dust and debris spilling into the smoldering crater. And then, with a sound like the groan of shifting metal, Karvok emerged. His armor was cracked, scorched black by the explosion, but the Zerani commander still stood. His breathing was heavy, his mandibles twitching in pain, yet his eyes burned with something primal. "You should have made sure," Karvok rasped, blood dripping from his mouth. Logan didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. The plasma bolt struck Karvok dead center. His armor sparked, his body jerking back from the force of the shot. But he did not fall. He kept coming, one step, then another, his energy blade crackling to life. Ava staggered beside Logan, wiping blood from her temple. "You've got to be kidding me." Karvok surged forward. Logan sidestepped his first swing, barely missing the violet arc of energy that would have cleaved him in two. He swung his rifle like a club, striking Karvok in the side of the head. The Zerani snarled, backhanding Logan with bone-breaking force. Logan hit the ground hard, his vision flashing white. Pain bloomed in his ribs. Ava lunged, her knife flashing, but Karvok caught her by the throat, lifting her off the ground with terrifying ease. "You fight like starving beasts," Karvok sneered. "Desperate, reckless. But you cannot stop the Empire. You never could." Ava choked, her fingers clawing at his grip. Logan forced himself to move, dragging his sidearm from its holster. His fingers trembled from exhaustion, but he steadied his aim, pointing the barrel directly at Karvok's exposed jaw. "You're right," Logan muttered, pulling the trigger. The shot burned through the side of Karvok's face. He roared in pain, his grip on Ava loosening just enough for her to drive her knife deep into the gap beneath his arm. The blade bit flesh. Karvok staggered, and then Logan was on him. Fueled by nothing but raw fury, Logan tackled the Zerani commander, driving him back toward the edge of the ruined platform. Karvok snarled, swinging wildly, but Logan didn't stop. He rained down blows, fists, elbows, anything to keep the alien off balance. Then the ground beneath them cracked. The platform, weakened from the explosion, gave way. Logan felt himself falling, weightless for a brief moment, before he hit the ground below with a force that drove the air from his lungs. Karvok crashed beside him, his massive form half buried in rubble. Logan gasped, forcing himself onto his elbows. Every part of him screamed in protest, but he wasn't done. Not yet. Karvok coughed, blood trickling from his mouth. His energy blade had flickered out. His body was broken. "You," the Zerani commander rasped, his voice weak for the first time. "You truly think this changes anything?" Logan crawled forward, pulling a combat knife from his belt. He gripped Karvok by the throat, forcing the alien to meet his gaze. "It changes everything." And with that, Logan drove the knife into his heart. Karvok shuddered, his mandibles twitching. His eyes widened, not with rage, but with something else. Understanding. And then the life drained from him, his body going still beneath Logan's grip. It was over. For a long moment, Logan simply sat there, breathing heavily. Around him, the battle was winding down. The Imperial forces, leaderless, were retreating, scrambling to escape the burning wreckage of their own warship. Ava dropped down beside him, bruised and bleeding, but alive. She let out a breath, looking at Karvok's corpse before turning to Logan. "You okay?" Logan wiped the blood from his brow. "No." Ava huffed a weak laugh. "Good. Means you're still human." Logan exhaled, pushing himself to his feet. His ribs ached. His head pounded. But as he looked around, he saw something else. Survivors. The Resistance fighters, battered but unbroken, emerged from the ruins. Some carried wounded allies. Others scavenged weapons from fallen Imperials. But none of them looked afraid anymore. Because they had won. It wasn't the end of the war. The Empire still stretched across the stars, still commanded fleets and armies beyond imagining. But they had learned something today. Earth would not break. And for every woman and child they had slaughtered, the Resistance would make sure the Empire paid in kind. Logan turned toward the burning sky, watching as the last remnants of the warship vanished into the void. The war wasn't over, but it had just begun.